Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I'm back. How about that? Friday FARcast. We're here on YouTube today, which is I think it's a good thing. All right, so let me cut my volume and let me go in and get my virtual background set up here. Yes, I do have a green screen. You'll see it briefly. There it is. So we get a little more detail back there. Happy Friday, everyone. We're going to be kicking things off here in about 3 or 4 minutes. We're going to start off with my good friend Jeanette Hormuth, who has been steering this very interesting stand. How do you steer a stand? I think you can steer a stand. We're going to explore if you can steer a stand when the Crimis come on today. But Jeanette has been facilitating. She's been facilitating a process here in Fredericksburg in the Hill Country around putting legal limits on what the city council, the mayor, and the city manager can do by the use of affidavits. So she's going to be on here in about 2 minutes, and we're going to talk about that. I'm actually going to play the video from the city council meeting again, and this was from Monday night. It's a 15-minute video. So we're going to play that so you can watch it. And there are people who watch the 15 Minutes of Flame broadcast who have seen this before, but there are some of you who are connected to this show through YouTube. And by the way, I'm going to try to do as many Friday FARcasts here as possible because we want to be able to reach as many people as possible. If I'm going to run into content around getting strikes or whatever is going to be deemed not community or communally acceptable with YouTube, we'll be over on the website, and then I'll figure out some way to edit and re-upload the pertinent parts of the show to this channel. So for now, Friday FARcast will be here. And I've actually renamed the channel. This was the 15 Minutes of Flame channel, and it's now the Friday FARcast channel, so that we can have an actual place where people can congregate and meet and hang out with chat. So we're going to bring Jeanette on for the first roughly half hour. And we're going to talk about what happened on Monday night. And then around 1:45 East Coast, 12:45 Central, and 10:45 for you Pacific Coasters, the Crimis will join us, and we're going to jump into the Kazakhstan trip. And there's a lot going on there, and there are a lot of different layers happening with Kazakhstan. And we're living in revolutionary times. These are revolutionary times, and we're going to take a look at the revolution abroad and the revolution at home. So without further delay, let me bring my good friend Jeanette in here. Jeanette, are you there?
Here I am.
There you are. There you are. Tilt your camera down just a little bit. You got a little too much headspace. Perfect. Right there. Right there.
It won't stay. Hang on.
All right.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That'll work.
Hi, Robert.
How's it going?
It's going great. Great. Busy.
Good. Yeah. Well, you are a one-woman wrecking crew here, one-woman demolition team in Fredericksburg, but in a good way, right? In a really, really good way. So for people that don't know Jeanette, I first met her in 2018 when we began to organize and do our best to remove the fluoride from the water supply here in Texas, not in Fredericksburg, Texas. And we had been emboldened by the efforts of Sam Brannon down in San Marcos, who over a 2-year period was able to legally removed the fluoride from the water supply of San Marcos. And then quickly thereafter, it was removed from Buda and Kyle. So we got together and we put together a petition to get enough signatures to get it on the ballot so we could amend the city charter, which we did. And Jeanette was tireless. I think you probably got about 75% of those signatures, if I'm not mistaken.
Knocked on a lot of doors. Yes.
Yep. So then once we got it on the ballot, we organized, I think probably too well, actually. In looking back on our time doing this, I would have had a bit of a different approach with our campaign. It was too good because the dentists began to freak out and they began to really seriously organize. And I've told this story before. I mean, they thought we were part of some really powerful and rich group out of Austin. And it was really just me and you and a little bit of Tea Party help and a few other people. And, and we were just on it. We had good tools. We had good communication. Thanks to a few really kind people. We had a pretty decent budget to advertise. So they really saw us as this threat. And they went all in, right? All in. The newspaper went all in. We had a whole high strange tale around the voting, which we're not going to get into due to time constraints today. But that's where I met Jeanette, and we've continued to be friends. And Jeanette has really grown through this process. So she's never really strayed far away from being involved and standing up for what's right. And she told me this week that when she first started to go to city council meetings, there were like 2 people there or 3 people there. Isn't that right?
Right. Nobody goes to city council meetings.
But now it's kind of the thing to do. It's like an in thing.
It is a happening place. I mean, I turned to one friend, one city council meeting, and I said, Monday night is the most exciting place to be, So, yeah.
Absolutely. And the genesis of this political involvement 2.0 really started with, and some people who follow the channel know about the Tattletale tool. And the Tattletale tool was put on the city's website so that people could tell on businesses in the city that were not complying with the COVID standards. And, that really got people out of their chairs. And we were down at the university center, and there were so many of us that they couldn't let us all in, although they could, right? They could have. So we had to kind of take turns and go in, and one person would go out and another person would come, and we would speak over to the city council. And that was really a rallying point.
And they had over 150 people showed up. About 35 people spoke. It took 2 hours. Now compare that to an empty city council meeting room with 1 or 2 people, which is how it usually is. And maybe 1 person or 2 people will speak, so that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. And when you have 2 people in a city council meeting, they can get away with just about anything, right? There's no accountability. There's no witnesses. So now it's a very different reality. And we have a number of people that have still been a part of that kind of first wave that took place during that Tattletale tool experience, which, by the way, they eventually removed. So our active participation made a difference there. And as a result of that, we continue to become actively involved. And so there are 2 kind of big moments here in terms of where we are now. The first moment was when we decided that we wanted to petition the city to make all businesses essential. And this was a platform that I was running on. And then Tom Marshall, who was also running, he agreed, and he wanted to run on the same platform. So we decided that we wanted to make all businesses essential here in Fredericksburg, and you and a number of other people went to a lot of the local businesses. Can you talk about how that unfolded?
Okay, so we were proposing a resolution that simply where the city would basically affirm something that they really took an oath to do anyway, which is to protect the people's rights. And this was particularly for businesses that we would see all businesses as essential, and that we would not be closing them down, that they have a right to be open if they want to be open. But it also did extend to individual rights as well. So but it wasn't anything new. It was just affirming something that the city council members and elected officials take an oath to in the first place. So I went to the different businesses, and I was amazed and encouraged, because many of the businesses, I didn't run across really anyone who was against this. They were all on board, and many of them did not shut down. They would not comply. And anyway, it was really great, and they were all very, very thankful for what we were doing. So I had I saw almost most of the businesses all up and down Main Street for one thing, and then others. Then we had a lot of community support. We had about 100 people show up at the city council meeting, all asking them to put this on the agenda. And many people testified for it. And basically, it was ignored after repeated requests for this, to at least have a discussion about it. So that was kind of telling.
Right. And I think that led to stage 2 in terms of your evolution, which was, how can we bring out some heavy lumber here? If they're not going to listen to us and just do what is really their civic duty to even talk about this thing in an open forum, well, what can we do to have them take us more seriously? Which led to you getting involved in the affidavit process. Do you want to talk about that?
Right. Okay. Well, what started that was another major issue that had to do with this funding that's coming in. That in the contract, it's got some troubling strings.
And you're talking about the American Rescue Plan.
Yes. So it has a number of things in there, but the main thing is it has an open-ended line in there about complying to all executive orders. Those aren't specified. That means that could happen at any time, at the drop of the pen. Anything could be issued now or in the future. So that to tie those funds to something like that could potentially infringe upon the people's inalienable rights. Your private affairs are your private affairs. They cannot. So that leaves a big. It sets up a pretty precarious situation and a constitutional conflict, and also a problem with conflict with state sovereignty and local control and everything else. So anyway, we were trying to figure out how, actually the whole year, how do you resolve a situation where your public officials are not responsive to the people that they took an oath to serve. And also they took an oath to the Constitution. A lot of this has to do with constitutional things, the thing about shutting down town, having, different mandates, and then the simple thing of us bringing, a resolution to protect our town from any future infringements, and for them not to want to step up or even to talk about it. That's the problem. So this issue is really big, because this is really big. So we found out that one is, it was never disclosed to us the details of this contract. It was signed, and before they even knew all the details.
And you and I did an interview around this, and you got the FOIA request for the contract itself, and the signature of Kent Myers, who is the city manager, right?
Right. I got an open records request after several months of asking for this information, or asking what kind of strings are attached, or what are the details. And I was told that they didn't have all that yet, that the government hasn't finished writing it, but they went ahead and signed the contract before they had everything. Right. And then they never disclosed it to the people. these details, especially about the contract, and the terms and conditions were never revealed. And so when I found out about it, I went down to the city council meeting to present that to them and bring it to their attention and say, have you seen this? And basically they didn't respond, and we never heard from them. So the next city council meeting, we had 100 people show up again saying, send the money back. And I got to say, Robert, the people that are showing up at the city council meeting are amazing. I mean, they are so well informed, so articulate, very intelligent, wide range of people. I mean, it's not like it's totally spontaneous. I mean, it's not like this is organized. It's like they all come with their part to say whatever it is, and it just blows my mind.
Yep.
So,
Yep. This is very decentralized. There's no strategizing, or you're going to say this, I'm going to say that, and it's just all very spontaneous and self-organizing, which I think is really interesting and
they're
powerful,
speaking,
very powerful.
Yeah, they come out and they speak with whatever's like on their heart or whatever they're drawn to. And a lot of them have done incredible research. I mean, it wasn't like just people showing up and complaining. I mean, they have spent hours researching, checking out things, everything else. So all these people showed up. Every single person said, send the money back, gave all these really weighty reasons to do so, or to at least have a discussion about it, And again, it was mum's word from, the council.
Well, so there was a moment where Kent basically said, Kent Myers, city manager, said, oh, this is just like any other government grant. We get body armor for the police through the government, and we're getting some money for a parking facility through the government. Like, just lighten up. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. We do it all the time. And during that meeting, the city attorney refuted him 3 times publicly and basically said, on this point, they were right. On this point, they were right. On this point, they were right. They being the citizens who were speaking that night.
And he said it was concerning that the language in there was pretty black and white, and those EOs, open-ended EOs, are a problem.
So then the newspaper the next day or 2 days later, and I think probably in concert with Kent, spun the whole thing, right? They gave Kent the headline story in the paper, and he was able to explain the city's position, why the money was acceptable, and he was using the Texas Municipal League as.
Wait. Let me correct you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Good.
Okay, that was the next meeting. So the first meeting was when the lawyer corrected him. So the thing is that when he speaks, the city manager, he speaks last. So we can't come back and
we can't rebut him. We can't rebut him. Yeah.
And what happens is these misinformation and
disinformation, really.
Disinformation, falsehoods, really, get out there, and then the paper takes it, runs with it, and then we have to wait 2 weeks before the next city council meeting. So the next city council meeting, we all showed up again, spoke up. I think this one is where we submitted their notice. We did the notice at that one or the one before. I think the one before, when we had 100 people showing up, and we served them with 150 notices.
Right, which they ignored.
And we couldn't even keep up. We couldn't print them. We kept running out, and people wanted to sign them. So we did that. And then he comes out with that, nothing to worry about. He never addressed the people's concerns, just said, don't worry about it. Nothing to see here, nothing behind the mirror. So the next city council meeting, he brings up this article or comments from Texas Municipal League. Now, Texas Municipal League is a membership organization that cities can belong to through our tax money. And Texas Municipal League does different things, but basically their number one priority is they're a lobby organization. They lobby in Austin for the entity of the cities against the people. They're big government. They're not protecting the people's rights. They're all about how to get more money from the people, how to, do all this stuff. So this is who he's reading from as his source. So he says, well, 1,000 cities in Fredericksburg belong to this, and
Citizens, right?
Citizens. These are their comments. These are not my comments. These are their comments. And he reads the comments, and among them, the most egregious one, which was a blatant falsehood, was that this contract was not between the city and the federal government. And so, of course, everyone knew that was untrue. All you have to do is look at the contract. The contract that Kent Myers signed in his name as authorized representative from the city of Fredericksburg is to the U.S. Department of Treasury. That's who we are bound to. Now, how is it he could be signing a contract to the federal government, the U.S. Department of Treasury, and not know that this statement was false, and then to read it to the public? Of course, the paper picks it up. The paper runs a headline, TML dismisses strings attached worries. And then they thought they shut the door on this coffin.
And what did you do?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I sent emails to Kent Myers and asked him if he was aware that TML retracted their statement, for one thing, because I found out that Texas Right to Know, Sheila Hemphill from there, had contacted them after she heard what happened to us, because the same thing happened to her in her town. And because everybody's reading these statements from TML across the state. Now, these cities are using that information to make decisions, right? Okay, so I contacted Kent. I asked him if he was aware that they retracted their statement. I told him that if they haven't notified him, that I find that very troubling, that the very organization they use, that they would depend on trustworthy information to guide them in their policies and decisions, would not only give this false statement in the first place, because it contradicts all of the documents if you just read if you understand this contract and the law and all the information they have, it's in there in numerous places that shows it's, so I said, if, for them to print this in the first place, be corrected of the error, and then to retract it silently without properly informing anyone, that's gross negligence and incompetency on their part, okay? And then I also included in that email, I turned to him and I said, how is it, I would like to know what led you to read that statement in the first place that was false. Didn't you yourself sign the contract to the US Department of Treasury? I said, did you not read and understand the terms and conditions, So what was interesting, and I pressed him to, asked him when he will be putting that out in the public, because the people have a right to be informed and know that this has been retracted and it was false. So he said that he would do it at the next city council meeting, because that's where he read it the last time. However, as you know, it went all over the town through the paper, right? So I said, that's great, but I think you need to get the paper to put something in, And so he again said he was going to read it at the city council meeting, but I pressed him again, and I had those other questions I had asked him, he hadn't answered, and asked him for those answers. He said he'd do it at the city council meeting. So we go to the city council meeting, and he did give the retraction. And thankfully, the paper did print it. And by the way, I emailed the paper too and pressed them on this. So they did a pretty good job, I gotta say. I was amazed, because this doesn't usually happen, but they did a really good job of at least putting that out there. But again, still.
And the TML had to make a public statement too, right?
No, they never did.
They never did? Oh, I thought they did.
No, all they did is Kent called them to confirm whether they retracted it. They said they did, but they still haven't informed anybody.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And that's troubling. That's a problem there. And then it's a problem, like I said, for him to present it in the first place. We pay him a lot of money. I don't know. I think he gets like around $200,000 a year. I'm not sure.
Easy.
But a
Plus
lot of money.
he gets an expense account,
Yes.
right?
And
Plus he gets benefits, you know.
His job is to inform and instruct and advise the city council. And he's the one that handles the contracts. He's supposed to know what he's doing. And if he, to me, that's gross negligence and incompetency.
Oh, totally. It's either gross negligence, incompetence, or outright manipulation.
Yes. So that's what happened there. And by the way, during that meeting, again, there were, it was a full house. And when people heard him give that false statement, some people reacted and interrupted, like said, that's a lie or whatever. Mm-hmm. And also people were still speaking about this money because, again, the city had not responded. The city was just ignoring, basically, mm-hmm. it seems. So the next meeting, we had all these police show up. They had 3 police. Usually there's one friendly policeman there, They had 3 police. They had all these signs about firearms. They had, they roped off, part of the people from the council. Mm-hmm. And they started this narrative that that the people are so disrespectful and rowdy and dangerous,
Yeah, they were basically they were just tired of people getting in their face and calling them on their BS. So they decided that they wanted to create the illusion of almost like a January 6th kind of environment. I mean, mm-hmm. it was quite bizarre and troubling, and led to changing the rules of decorum for meetings, which they just voted on this past week. So let's fast forward and let's get into this whole affidavit process, because I want to play a clip of the delivery of the affidavit. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to start from where you're talking, and then we're going to show the delivery of the affidavits to the city council. So just touch on briefly how you came across that, who you worked with in terms of the kind of the global model, right? And maybe not personally, but the global model.
Sure. Okay.
And how that's unfolded here in the community.
Right. Basically, like I said, I was always looking for how do we address the situation where your public officials are basically ignoring you, no matter what you do, no matter how many people you have show up, no matter how many emails people send, how do you make them accountable? And I discovered that across the country, there's a movement of something called affidavits and notices that is a legal tool that you can use, and it's very effective. It's through the people. It's using constitutional pressure, and this is how the audits got happening in Arizona when nobody else could do it. With all those lawsuits and all the everything else, it was through silently. It's a peaceful legal way of bringing to the attention to your elected officials or whoever, laying out what it is that their obligations and authority is and isn't, and where they're missing the mark, and that you're calling them to correct it, and you give them an opportunity to do that. And then they have an opportunity to respond, that if anything you wrote was untrue, that they can refute it, but they have to do it by sworn oath and affidavit. Okay, they can't just run to the paper and just say whatever they
want. So now they're in an actual legal process now that they have to follow through with. This is important.
Right. Okay. So we did a notice initially, which brings to attention whatever what needs to be corrected, whatever wrongdoing or whatever. And they didn't respond. So then we moved to an affidavit. And that's what we just delivered the other night. The affidavit is a sworn statement by the people under penalty of perjury that everything we wrote, it represented in there is true to the best of our knowledge and belief and information. So again, they have time to respond if anything of that is untrue. However, when they don't respond in both of these, it states that if they don't respond, they are acquiescing, they're agreeing that everything in there is true and therefore can be used as evidence, as truth, you know? So it's very powerful. This is a very serious legal document. And so we delivered, that was our next step, to deliver to them, because when they did this contract, they signed it and they approved it without the people knowing, without disclosing the information. Those important details were never discussed. They did not include the community in these discussions.
There was no vote in the city council, right? Which would have meant that it would have had to have been an agenda item, and then people could be on the record. I mean, clearly on the record.
Right.
And there's I think there's a bit of a difference when there's a commentary and it's on the agenda item as part of the public record, because it is attached to that position, right? A public comment is just a public comment. But when it's attached to an agenda item, then that is attached to that person who's voting on that agenda item. It's attached to their voting record. It's a very clear illustration of where they stand, whether it's with the people, the citizenry, or the status quo, which in this case is really about promoting a corporate city and even global agenda on a local level, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. So this is an important piece here, because right, they would not put it into the agenda. They wanted it as far away from prying eyes as possible, and that didn't happen. And you know, through the diligence of people like you and the people that are connecting with you and supporting you, and it's again, this is not what I'd call organized. It's really self-organized, which I think is very interesting. And it's through this work that they have been put on notice, literally and figuratively, for what they're doing and not doing. So what I want to do is I want to play a portion of the clip. It's when you take to the podium and finish out this process of reading the affidavit and then the delivery of the affidavits, which I think is very powerful.
We read the whole affidavit and we had several people take parts of it. And this is the last part.
By the way, I want to give a shout out to Jet Burns, who did a great job of videotaping the panoramic shot here. And a really inspirational young guy who's jumped in feet first and is at a lot of the meetings, and gives me a lot of hope for the not just the future of Fredericksburg, but the future of our world.
There's a lot of great young people coming out, and they are getting open records requests or researching stuff. It's amazing. So
this is the Rogues Gallery here. From right to left, we've got Tom Musselman, Charlie Keeney, Mayor Charlie Keeney. We have Bobby Watson, and of course, Jerry Lukenbach. And this bald head over here is Kent Myers. You can't see him. All right, let's play this. It's about 3 minutes and 52 seconds long. Here we go.
Jeanette Hormuth, one of the people as seen in Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas State Constitution. Please take final notice of Affian's declaration that by this tacit agreement of trespass against the constitutional rights of the people, the Mayor Charlie Keeney, the City Manager Kent Myers, and the members of the City Council of Fredericksburg, Texas, agreed to the following conditions. Number 1, payment of any disbursements of allocated funds from the U.S. Treasury back into the City of Fredericksburg accounts from their own personal finances. 2, public announcement of this action and availability to the community of those documents verifying that all monies received from the U.S. Treasury were returned to that federal entity. 3, publication and public availability of any other records of programs used to bring federal funding into the city of Fredericksburg, Texas. And 4, the mayor, Charlie Keeney, the city manager, Kent Myers, and the members of the City Council of Fredericksburg also agreed to pay an additional fine of $24,000 each to the city of Fredericksburg, Texas accounts in restitution for their transgressions against the constitutional rights of the people of Fredericksburg. If the mayor, Charlie Keeney, the city manager, Kent Myers, and the members of the City Council of Fredericksburg, Texas do not respond with a sworn affidavit within 3 days showing the constitutional provisions authorizing this trampling of the people's rights, the mayor, Charlie Keeney, the city manager, Kent Myers, and the members of the City Council of Fredericksburg, Texas agree to all of the above mentioned facts, point by point, and agree that this affidavit can be used as evidence of liability, malfeasance, and maladministration. And further, that Mayor Charlie Keeney, the city manager, Kent Myers, and the members of the City Council of Fredericksburg, Texas, agree that no court shall re-examine this matter, that the court shall accept the above several agreements listed, regardless of the trespasser, as truth and law. Affiant agrees to arbitration by an arbitrator of the affiant's choice. I hereby declare, certify, subscribe, and affirm that under the lawful laws of the United States of America and by the provisions of 28 U.S. Code 1746, that all of the above and foregoing representatives are true and correct to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief. We now serve the City Council and the Mayor and the City Manager with the affidavits.
We need permission to bring them.
No, just bring them up to Shelley, please.
Okay. He said we can.
And then Kimberly, while you're up here, you're our next speaker.
Okay. Awesome. You're going to let us to bring the boxes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Want to grab those, Shelley?
Sure.
Thank you. Oh my.
Oh my.
But wait, there's more.
All right. So those are all signed and notarized affidavits. How many of them were there? 130?
We had 134, which is, I think that's really awesome because you consider these affidavits are they're like sworn witness statements. It's like having 134 witnesses at a trial, all testifying to the same thing.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing.
Yep.
So these affidavit notices, basically what they're doing is they're instructing and reminding our elected officials of their duty, their obligation to the Constitution and to the people. The people have the highest authority. It says all political power is inherent in the people. That's in the Texas Constitution and all the state constitutions, and that the governments derive their powers and everything through the consent of the people. So they are amenable to them at all times. And these notices and affidavits kind of lay it out as to what their duties are and obligations, and again, how they are, they're working contrary to that. And so they need to fix it.
72 hours have passed. What's happened?
Okay, I haven't heard anything. We usually give them a little time. And we frankly, in this process, often they don't respond. But that's okay, because again, if they don't respond, they have just agreed that everything in there is true. And now this is a piece of serious legal evidence, you see? And so they are basically getting themselves into hot water if they keep going down the road and not cease and desist.
What's the next step?
Okay, the next step is first, like I said, we're gonna give them a little bit of time because all of this is important, because if you, in a court of record, we want to show that we've done everything and gave them every opportunity. So we are now working on the next step, which is a courtesy notice of default. So,
and anybody that has any legal training, like theoretically the city attorney Daniel would, he would know that that's the next step, right? He would know that this would be coming in sequence.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the notice, a lot of people don't pay attention to the notice. They think, oh, they're just going to go away. This is no big deal. But we're getting deeper here.
Yep.
And
We are getting deeper.
We're getting deeper. So.
And I also want to point out that there's a process around this
Yes.
that is really inspiring. And we touched on it just a little bit earlier. And I really want to leave on the sort of the miraculousness of the process, right? Like when people align with truth, then truth begins to align with the people. And that's when you see this organic assemblage of people really talking and living from their hearts and doing it in a very articulate way. And I just want to go back to that meeting. I've told this story again before, when we were at Crossroads, and I was really shocked when all those people were there. I walked in after you had started it and you were talking about the process. I walked into that back room. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people here, a lot of people I didn't know. And there was the one fellow who had some misgivings about certain language inside of the affidavit. And there was another fellow who addressed that, and it was very polite and respectful, even though they didn't agree. And then the one fellow who has some misgivings about the language, he said, this thing is bigger than my concern about how it's being presented, so I'm going to sign anyway. And when I saw that, I thought, this is really good. We're getting people that are not part of the city council sort of meeting team. These are other people. That's number one. Number two, we're having an open discussion about it. Number three, we're not necessarily agreeing on some of the fine points, but we're agreeing on the big picture. And I thought, this is interesting. This is very interesting. And I felt like, really, Jeanette, I felt like I was at the signing of the Declaration of Independence that night. And I know it sounds a bit overstated, but it really had that feel to it.
No, I think many people felt that way. I have to say there's something very powerful about truth. And when you put something down in writing like this, in a legal document, and presented formally like this, it's not just people coming down complaining or writing a bunch of emails or petitioning or showing, that means nothing. In fact, in law, nothing is considered true. A matter is not considered true unless by sworn oath. And these affidavits are individuals. Every one of those represents an individual that is swearing to this and is a witness to this, to this truth. That is so powerful. And but the people coming out, it's just amazing. They're like people from all over. I mean, people that never have ever gone to city council meetings, people that, I mean, it's just everywhere. And people are bringing I had one lady bring her mother who was like, I don't know, 90 or something, in a wheelchair. We've had people come, that are handicapped to get down there. And we have young people coming and old people and middle people. I mean, it's just was wonderful. And they all weren't just people that were just running to sign a petition. Oh yeah, let's get on. We don't like this. Blah, 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 blah. No, these are people that really understood this issue deeply, the implications of this in the big picture, and how it strikes at the very core of who we are as a country and where we're headed. And they also all recognized the fact that God has to be in the picture.
Yep.
So deeply faithful people, deeply American people, and people that took the time, because this takes effort. This is not some, fly by night, thing. I mean, it took effort for people to get there, to get the notaries, to understand the document and understand all the things that are going on with this contract and all of that. So it was amazing. It was uplifting for everyone. I can't tell you how many people just are so thankful that we're doing this, and they felt uplifted. Everybody's feeling encouraged because they're seeing there's many more people like them seeing what they're seeing and concerned, and it gave them something to do. When you actually can do something, that's so empowering.
Right. It's an action item. It's an action item, and people are more motivated, I think, when they take action. Like I totally agree with you. Gives them something to do. Yep.
Yeah.
There's something else that I wanted to say about this whole thing. I mean, I hope that people who are watching this can be inspired, and you can see what we're doing here with a lot of effort on your part, Jeanette. But you're not the only person or the only group that's doing this in the United States. And that's how you clicked in with the whole affidavit process. And I think that that's really important to understand, is that, we're not alone. We're connected. We may not be formally connected, but we're connected in our effort and our intent to really pump the brakes on the egregious overstep of our local government and our local school boards and our local hospitals, for that matter, as well.
Well,
And it all
even
starts
on the
here.
state level, they're sending really hundreds of thousands of these affidavits of notices have been going out in different things. And I want to say that, again, this is what got the audits happening in Arizona. It's bringing, I think some of those other audits are starting to possibly happen. This just recently, the United Auto Workers, across the country, again, they dropped their mandate, for employees, or get fired, get this or get fired, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Under the scenes to that were these affidavit as notices.
So the UAW.
This is behind a lot of things that are dropping.
Oh, good.
Silently, but it's so cool because it's peaceful. It's not a big emotional thing. It's not, a bunch of signs and people, all this. It is truth. You're just bringing the truth, I mean, it's so, I don't know. I think it's a blessing from God.
And it's surgical. It's really focused and surgical in terms of its application. And that's important. Like, instead of a big shotgun blast, you're hitting them with a laser beam, and that'll get their attention. So, Jeanette, I just want to thank you again for all your hard work, and it's a real pleasure to be in this with you. Mad respect, and to all the other people that are involved, both here in Fredericksburg, in the Hill Country, and in the United States of America, and on the planet. I mean, this is where we are right now. We are on the front lines of tyranny versus freedom, and you've got to get in the game somehow. And this is
it's now or never. And by the way,
right.
we have gotten calls from Kerrville. They want to do something similar because they're fighting the same thing when they found out what was in there. I have someone up in Llano that took our affidavit, and she wants to see about there. 70 cities in Texas have turned the money back, And I know personally that Brady and Mason and Kerrville, it's because of the those terms and conditions that that are hidden, that nobody wants to talk about.
Yep. Well, Jeanette, I'm going to let you go. Thanks again for being here. And, we'll keep up with you, and we'll keep up with what's happening, and we'll keep people apprised. And in the meantime, God bless and take care of yourself. All right.
Yeah, you too. Good to see you.
Okay. Bye,
right.
Jeanette.
God bless.
All right. That was Jeanette Hormuth, who is really doing God's work. I mean, my God. You take a look at her. She's not very big. I mean, she's probably about maybe 5'4", demure, and she has become a force to be reckoned with here in this town and in this county. And to me, it's like, she's David, and we're going up against the Goliath, and we're all David. I think that's the beautiful part. But can we call it a different name though? Can we be like, I don't know. How about Daryl? We're all Daryl. Let's reframe it. Speaking of reframe, let's reframe the screen here and bring our good friends, the Crimis, on, who've just joined us.
Hey there.
Hello, friends.
Hello, friend.
Are you hear us? Everything's cool?
Yeah, we're good.
I like
Okay.
your map behind you.
Yeah, I thought it was a
Backdrop.
pretty neutral kind of background today,
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, Jeanette is amazing. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, isn't she something?
Yeah.
And I brought her on today because I wanted it to be on YouTube today, because I wanted as many people as possible to just kind of get a taste of what's happening here.
Mhm.
And I didn't tell her, but I'll tell you guys. I didn't want to interrupt her flow. She'll find out about it.
Uh-huh.
But so I got a phone call during the interview,
Oh.
and it's somebody from town, and she texted me that one of the city council members has actually moved. I mean, she just found that out.
Huh.
Now, she's using this thing called a homestead exemption, which means that theoretically she can still be a city council person, but all of her belongings have been moved out of her house, and she lives in Santa Fe now.
But she's still a city council in Frederick.
For now, I mean, so why is that? Why did she move?
Right.
She
Out
just
of
got elected.
jurisdiction.
She just got elected in November.
Huh.
I'm sorry, in May. That's when I
Okay.
ran for city council. So I think it has to do with the heat. That's what I think. I think I think the heat was getting a little too close to her for some reason. Now, I know that she's a dyed-in-the-wool. She's a nice person. I mean, I've talked to her. I mean, if you didn't know what her political persuasion was, you'd say, oh, this person's pretty okay, pretty cool. But she's a deep progressive. And now she's living in Santa Fe. And
Well, why not just resign? Why would you? That's a big deal to me.
well, I think it's huge. And honestly, I think that people are going to have to ask for a recall on her seat.
Mhm.
And what I would do is, I would give her a seat to the guy who finished second behind her.
Right. That's
That would be
normally.
seem
Mhm.
like a fair thing.
Yeah. And I think it should happen. It should happen like in the next 3 weeks.
Mhm.
So we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Or it sounds like Sir Robin in Monty Python and the Holy Grail with his little bards following behind singing, he chickened out and he ran away. He chickened out and he ran away. Sir Robin,
So I had this thing with Monty Python when I was a kid. And the first time I saw Monty Python was on Johnny Carson. And I don't think they were actually on the show, but I think Johnny Carson played a clip. And I watched it, and I was young. I think I might have been around, maybe 13 or 14. I'm like, what is this? It was very intriguing.
Mhm.
And then PBS started to, play the TV series and the episodes. And I'm like, wow, I really love this. This is great, crazy, goofy
Mhm.
British humor. Maybe I understood about half of it or 3/4 of it. And the parts that I did understand, I cracked up. And then later on, by the time I was a senior in high school, there were kids like walking around my school singing the Lumberjack song. And at that point, it's like, what? You guys have fucking discovered Monty Python? Oh man, I'm off.
That's it. That's
Oh,
it.
interesting.
I'm
Yeah.
off the bus. So, and I'm telling you the story is because I've never seen Life of Brian or The Holy Grail because of that. Because when Monty Python went mainstream, I was like, I'm somewhere else. So I should probably go back. I should probably watch those movies. I've never
Oh,
watched.
you'll
yeah.
probably laugh your ass off.
Oh yeah. Life of Brian is actually very underrated. There's just some, amazing pieces in there. Yeah, we actually when I was a senior in high school, they did just a couple of live stints, one at the City Center in Manhattan, and then I think also at the Hollywood Bowl, which was
Oh,
filmed.
really?
And so we went in, and the thing is, it wasn't just them on stage. I mean, I think we were up in the balcony.
Oh, so you got to see them live.
Yes, we got to see him live. I was, besides being hysterical, even though we knew the parrot sketch and all that stuff. But they used the Eric Idle would be like, all of a sudden he'd be in the wings. He'd be on the stage. I mean, they used the whole theater when they did the show. They would have people chasing, and they just did they just did an amazing job. I was really, really enjoyed that.
It's such, and the plethora of individual talent in that troupe was tremendous, including Terry Gilliam,
Yeah.
who did the animated bits.
The openings, yeah. Too.
Yeah, in the animated bits inside of it. It's incredible how they all went on to become stars in their own right, except for Graham, what's his name?
Yeah, well, he was ill and died.
Yeah,
early.
is that what happened? Did he
He
pass
was an
away?
actual physician too. He was an actual doctor.
Interesting, and he's the one that died.
Yeah, Graham. No, I can't remember either. But yeah, so I think they operated in like partners. So Graham and Cleese would write together, and the other two. So they had like 3 sets of 2 they would write together, and then and obviously their competition must have been fierce, because they had to make each other laugh.
Right.
So I think that
Which
just brought
I'm sure
out
that wasn't hard.
Yeah, I just think that brought out the best of them.
Yeah, I didn't get to appreciate them until I was an adult. I just didn't have the sophistication when I was younger. But I had to live a little and learn a lot before I could really appreciate them.
You had to
But
catch up with
was
Steve
the-
Crimi.
I had to catch up with Steve on so many things.
So many
Grateful
ways, but,
Dead.
I've had to catch up on, the difference between Leatris and Elysianthus and Alyssum.
Right.
So
yeah.
there you go.
Tell us, please.
That was kind of alliterative, actually. That was good.
That's
It
it.
was.
There are 3 flowers that look very much alike, and then I'll just confuse them
Mhm.
in perpetuity.
I was going to ask you. Oh, did you ever watch Fernwood Tonight by any chance?
Oh, very little.
Very low, yeah.
So that was a show that was my thing with Martin Mull. I love Fernwood Tonight.
Huh.
I played the one clip from there called
A little bit.
"Let's Meet a Jew." Have you seen that one?
Yeah,
I don't remember
think
any
so.
of it.
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe I'll play before the show ends today.
And there was.
I'll get a copyright strike. I can't do
And what was the relationship between that and Soap? Were they?
No,
spin-offs,
there was
or
a
was it
relationship between Fernwood Tonight and Mary Hartman.
Oh, Mary
Okay.
Hartman. Oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they both took place in Fernwood, Ohio.
Okay.
Huh.
And
Okay.
it was Norman Lear who was connected to both series.
Mhm.
And Fernwood Tonight is a spinoff from that. So it was great. Fred Willard, Martin Mull, rotating cast of characters, including Tom Waits was on there at least 3 or 4 times.
Oh, really? Huh.
It's hilarious.
Oh, he's a trip.
Yeah.
He's a trip.
We did
Yeah.
see him live.
What was that like?
That was great. The storytelling between the songs.
Pure gravel.
Yeah, the storytelling between
he had,
the songs.
It was the tour of Rain Dogs.
Oh,
And
wow.
so Mark Quine was on guitar, and I don't remember the rest of the band. I maybe didn't know them all that well at the time. Yeah, it was a great show. It
Very
was,
powerful, yeah.
I forget which.
You mean
theater.
Mark Ribot? Mark Ribot?
Yeah, did I say? I think
You,
it was,
you,
it was
you
both.
combined Robert Quine with Mark Ribot.
Robert, right. It was Mark Ribot.
Yeah. Mark Ribot's have you heard his solo stuff?
Yeah, it's formidable.
It's really, I like Mark Ribot.
you
I think I
know.
talked to him on the phone one day.
Uh-huh.
Back in my independent music days. All right. So we were talking about the local. Let's go to the global. We wanted to jump into Kazakhstan today. I found a few other things since last night when we spoke. Now, the reason why we're talking about this today is because it was about a year and a half ago. We did a show, maybe close to 2 years ago.
Close,
It
right.
was, yeah. It
Right.
was right at
Right
the,
about now.
right at the beginning of things. It was like
It was the show that changed your life.
It was
Oh, yes, it did.
yeah, show one. Yeah,
It was a tectonic shift.
we did a show and a half on
The fallout. Let's call
On
it the
Kazakhstan.
fallout.
There was a show on the show and the show.
Oh boy, the show behind the show.
There was a show going
It's a
on
really
during the
big
show.
yeah. So we had
which is still
Like you, Krys, you had to get up during the show and deal with the other show that had to do with the
yes,
show.
and it was very dramatic. I
That
said,
was
oh, excuse me, we have someone at the door.
kind of like the
Sorry, we have an emergency we have to attend to.
the fourth wall was just breaking. It was like one of
Right.
those weird, like, frame within a frame thing happening.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
so-
and those
so
pieces
strange.
never came back together again.
Right.
So,
Well,
so we haven't talked about Kazakhstan
Right.
since then, well,
We
let's go
we did
back
a
to
show-
the.
We did do a show on Off Planet, but it was similar to the material we covered with you.
So let's return to the scene of the crime. There's the last 72 hours.
Well, started
just-
what, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Just world breaking, world quaking kind of an event there. And so the here's the sort of the public line is that the gas prices went up. People didn't like it. Energy gas prices went up. People didn't like it. They went after the government. The government resigns. And that's sort of where they're sort of dangling this in front of the rest of
Right.
the world. But of course,
Right.
there's always layers
Mhm,
to all
Yeah.
this.
mhm.
We
So,
tried-
so why don't we start there?
Mhm.
And let's jump into what you guys have been able to dig around with.
Yeah, I'll
and
let
find
Krys.
out.
Yeah, I'll let Krys do the narrative if you want.
Okay,
but yeah, just to say, I just want to say one funny thing. I was like, okay, well, this is kind of like a real world story. I was like, geez, I don't even know where to go for news.
Right.
We had a hard
You are
time.
the news now. You are the
You know,
news.
Well,
right. And so I looked at, all right, well,
there's
so
nothing.
so this is cobbled together from a couple of places, and Al Jazeera being one, because I looked at mainstream news and they had absolutely nothing,
There's
like you
nothing.
say. And I went to RT to see the Russian perspective on it. And then there's this thing called the Duran. I don't know if you know these guys.
I've heard of them.
It's two guys named Alexander who just seem to really know their shit.
Yeah, they're both named Alexander, Alex and Alexander. And the one guy just owned the information. It's like I don't know what he does for a living, but he owned the information. So he had all these in-depth. So I will just give, if you like, a quick synopsis. I wrote notes from what he was saying.
Sure.
So these are directly from what his analysis was. So, okay, it was a very well-organized regime change operation. They took down government buildings, police stations, airports were shut down in Almaty, which is the old capital, and it's down in the south, close to the border with
Kyrgyzstan.
Kyrgyzstan.
Right. Whereas
Okay,
Astana is more towards the north, closer to Russia.
yeah,
Right.
Astana is that very Disneyland-looking new
Right.
capital that Nursultan Nazarbayev created out of thin air, okay, and oil money.
It's right there on your map.
So this was very well organized across the whole country. So there were outbreaks in many places, not just in Almaty, but not much in Nur Sultan.
Nothing that we even heard of. We see no footage of Nur Sultan.
And then, as you
Awesome.
said, the liquid propane gas prices went up, and there were, in his opinion, outbreaks that were genuine of the people, local outbreaks, but then very quickly, these are very aggressive men came in and appeared out of nowhere and were clearly provocative. Then Wednesday looks like this operation is a success. It looks like they've knocked out the government and these other forces have taken control. But by Wednesday night, the president has regained control. So he's consolidated control in Nur Sultan, which is the present capital. And so Nur Sultan Nazarbayev, who is the person who he named the capital after himself. He was the first president of this new regime at the time when he built the capital.
Yeah, since the fall of the Soviet Union.
And the leader of the country. And he was in control of the security forces. And apparently his family, there's a lot of nepotism, and his family is embedded in all of these political positions.
His son was head of intelligence. His daughter was head of the parliament.
So then power passed to this new president whose name is Tokayev, Tokayev, Tokayev. But it's been a very weird passing of the power. So he is president, but it seems that all of these other holdovers are in conflict with him.
Kind of like the SES.
Like the
Here.
senior executive service in the United
Right.
States.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so he said that Tokayev sacked Nazarbayev. I have no idea what he means by that, but there was some transition of power. It sounds like from that statement that he feels Tokayev had some kind of power to push Nazarbayev out. I don't know. So then he took control of the security forces. And he started an operation to regain control of Almaty. So that would have been Wednesday night into Thursday.
Right. And he also sacked the parliament.
Right. Okay.
So the current president sacked the parliament?
Yes. Yes. So
Was
so
that
in
was
other
that
words, he
before or after they resigned?
well, I guess it's one of those resign or we'll fire you. I don't know.
Okay,
But I'm
so
pretty sure in my mind, he dissolved the parliament anyway for the time being, under the guise of the emergency. So they may have resigned after they were sacked.
okay, all right. So keep going, Krys.
This man continues and he says, critically, he called the Russians in and critically, they responded. In the past, these responses have been very slow and labyrinthine, but this was like immediate response, which is a new kind of a wrinkle that just has not happened in the past. So they got the support they needed immediately to regain control, to wrest back control. At that moment, the operation unraveled. It was clear to the security forces that the president was here to stay and he has the backing of the Russians. The security forces started to respond to the president's orders, and violent militia groups in Almaty and elsewhere were no match for the organized military force, being the Russian troops. But it's also, they have an organization of states like we have NATO. So after the fall of the Soviet Union, I guess there were 6 nation states that banded together and had treaties of protection and helping one another.
Quote CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization. So it's Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Russia, and I'm not sure the other one, Turkmenistan probably.
Okay, so that organization of, let's call it, of states came together as a group, like parallel to NATO, and they were the ones who sent in troops. So under the name of the Russian. Let me see.
And there are 2,000 troops, which is.
Have
really
you have
not a
you
big
have you
amount.
seen the deployment of the troops?
I didn't.
I don't know.
I have.
All right, I'm almost done here.
Keep going. Keep going.
So early Thursday, the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, with 6 former republics of the USSR, would send in peacekeeping forces across Kazakhstan. Blurring of the lines between internal and external response to this. And the reason is that Kazakhstan is teetering on the brink of collapse is domestic in nature. But there's a prolonged and increasingly weird, there was a prolonged and increasingly weird transfer of power from Nursultan Nazarbayev to Tokayev. And that's been a point of tension and anxiety, I think, on a national level for the people, because there's this pull and push, and they never really relinquished power, and sounds kind of like what we're going through. So that's the bulk of what he had to say, but he was just brilliant. So you could check the Duran, Duran, and see if you can find that interview. They were really, both Alex and Alexander, they were both very knowledgeable on the whole subject.
So I wanted to find a couple of things here. Thanks for that, Krys.
You're
for
welcome.
doing that.
Right.
I
So
wanted
while
to
you're
find.
looking, yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
So it seems like there's a big, well, yeah. So the big crack that has probably been happening for a while, as Krys said, is between, the president for life, basically, and then his chosen successor. And so that's one way of reading this, because we watched him in some sort of cabinet room, and he was cool as a cucumber.
Right.
He is supposedly in the middle of his country falling apart, and he's like someone who looks like he's got total control of the situation.
It's like he just showed up to work in the morning.
So so my mind goes to, okay, is he setting this up maybe with Russia? And we can get into the various aspects that make it look that way. Is he setting this up to make it look like somebody's coming in and using it as a pretext to get rid of the old guard? Because the protesters on the streets were shouting, get rid of the old man, something like that, who would have been Nazarbayev. And the other thing that really struck me was this one woman kind of on the street at the protest that was interviewed before they shut down the internet, which I think is still shut down. And when the protest got violent, there were apparently beheadings of some kind.
Oh, right.
And she said, I had no idea that the Kazakhs could be this way.
My people. Right?
My people. And whether or not it was her people or not remains to be seen. So that's a little more added into the soup.
Mm-hmm. Trying to find something here.
Also, just points of interest that Kazakhstan produces 40% of the world's uranium.
Right, which we touched on a little bit.
And gas and oil production are mostly American and European operated, and Chevron being the big kahuna in that group. And we talked about that back in the day 2 years ago.
And Ukraine is dependent on the gas, liquid, what do you call it? The liquid gas piped in from Kazakhstan to Ukraine, because Russia now won't sell them the gas, and they also sell to Russia. But that's I think that's in there somehow, where somehow this what's going on between Ukraine and Russia has something to do with this too, though it's a little.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like.
Right.
There's this kind of bait and switch going on, or a 3-card Monte, and probably some meeting where it was like, look, you can't have Ukraine, but we'll give you Kazakhstan, right? Like they'll go, okay, we'll look
with Taiwan too.
We'll look the other way here. There you go.
Yeah,
and we'll stage a military coup, and this feels very much like something that's kind of organic. You've got a bit of a yellow yellow vest situation, like in Paris, again, due to the fuel, and then piggybacking on that, and then sending in bad actors, agent provocateurs, black bloc types, to escalate the violence, and then call in for the heavy artillery. So on one level, I think that that's probably what we're looking at in terms of these mechanisms. I think there's a couple of other things also going on there that I'm going to kind of bring to the table here, and we can talk about it and have open up the discussion. So I found this. It's from Reddit, and the user's name is Commodify. So this is a quote from this Reddit contributor. Kazakhstan always was and still is a tribal society. The Uli Jews, J-U-Z, a tribal confederation in the southeast, has been running the place since 1465, according to this contributor. The dominant tribes of the Uli Jews, literally great horde, are the Zhalayir and the Duglat, and that's Zhalayr, Zhalayir, and the Duglat, Duglat. Virtually all the Communist Party officials in Kazakhstan come from those tribes, and the majority of almost every cabinet since independence has as well, because it's a tribal society. There is also a lot of social cohesion among the remaining 90% of the population who are not Duglat or Zhalayir. This is why the protests went from peaceful demonstrations to full-blown civil war. That's what they're saying, with protesters performing rudimentary small unit tactics, forcing police to surrender at RPG point in 3 days. The main social conflict in Kazakhstan since the Khazak genocide of the 1930s, where 70% of the population was starved or forced to China in the name of transforming a nomad society into a modern industrial worker state, has been between those connected to the state and those distant from it. Nearly all the entrepreneurial success stories after independence were the former, and nearly all the oil wealth went to them too. Though Kazakhstan has a fairly high GDP for the region and is still the most developed CIS state, it is highly unusual. The average income is around 10,000, but the median is only about 3,000. The social privilege being part of the elite group cannot be understated. Even the bulk of Kazakhstan's celebrities are from the elite group and propped up by massive oligarch-owned media conglomerates like Gaku TV. The conflict is wrapped up in nationalist terms as well. The elite of the country, living in places like Astana / Nur Sultan and Taldi Korgan, also known as Taldi Paris, are Russian-speaking, connected with Russia, and in some cases intermarried with Russians. Kazakhstan as a whole has moved sharply in the direction of steppe and Turkic nationalism since independence. However, with a rapid increase both in the use of Kazakh language and Kazakhs as a percentage of the population, Nazarbayev has successfully pursued a Fabian strategy of de-Russification, gradually pushing the Russian population out and increasing the Kazakh population, but this is not satisfactory to most young Kazakhs. The Kazakh opposition has been greatly influenced by the Kyrgyz revolution in their much poorer brother country. Nazarbayev regime held on to power as long as it could to maintain economic growth, but with oil crash there, unrest was inevitable. So this person is basically saying that there is this kind of Kazakh Kyrgyz youth brigade, nationalist and even Marxist driven kind of putsch. But now that the Russians have been called in, we kind of know why, because the Russians are part of the elite ruling class in that region and they're protecting their interests.
Yes, well, yeah, and the population, the last I looked, and this is coming from memories, is less than half Kazakh and maybe a third Russian, because it was under the Soviet Union for, I don't know, 60 years or something like that,
60,
maybe.
70.
So the Russian influence and of course you would assume that the Russian influence would be in the upper echelons of things. And so one of the things you mentioned, somebody else mentioned too, is that when the oil prices crashed, which would have been around 2017 or so, which was wonderful here, all of a sudden went down under $2 for the most part. That caused that drop in the median level of income within Kazakhstan, so that the rich stayed rich, but the poor people did not have the money to spend anymore. So
Because it was such a margin there.
yeah, so that was what
Mhm.
was holding up, sort of a middle class, if you will.
Sure.
So that's in the mix also.
Let me give you a bird's eye view here of what the Russians are sending to Kazakhstan. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So all these planes are scheduled to land there.
Yeah, and they're paratroopers.
Look at this. This is a huge deployment.
And this is going to Kazakhstan.
That's right.
So are they, because they have to cross the country and drop it in the south of the country? I mean, are they airdropping those tanks too? I don't.
I think the tanks are rolling. I think they're going to take some kind of overland route into the country, and they probably have their supply line lined up. That's what those.
Yeah. Well,
big trucks. Those big trucks have troops and supply line stuff.
It's really impressive in the snow. The stark.
So I shouldn't believe the only 2,000 coming in. Looking at that.
Troops.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty organized strike brigade here.
Right. It doesn't look like they're going in for a cup of cappuccino and leaving either.
Right, that's the whole thing. I mean, once you're in, it's like, okay, well, we're here now. Oh, the weather's too bad. We can't get back. We may as well stay here till spring, and maybe a little bit longer. Let me see if I can find another image of some of the Russian stuff.
So this fellow Alexander was posing at the end, like the big question for him is who's actually behind this operation. And then he said, you have to look at the map and see where Kazakhstan is situated with the huge Russian border and the Chinese on one side. And they're kind of like this triumvirate.
So
he didn't have an answer.
So they are some of those. So the Russians have these massive jets where you can hold a ton of equipment in, including military equipment, including tanks and carriers.
Right.
So here they are. They're already landing at Almaty. So they're being allowed airspace to come in there. That's the other thing. You have to.
Well, they've been invited, have they not?
And then, and I guess the airport is secure for them.
So here they are. They're look. These are really huge.
Yeah,
aircraft.
I remember when Russia was when they had fires in California, the Russians were saying, they have these huge planes to dump water on fires.
Yeah, that never made sense to me. It's like they use these enormous planes to dump the it's not just water. It's like
it's retardant.
It's retardant. And I was living in California at the time. I'm like, why don't you just do a deal with these guys,
right?
And just get two of them and bring over a team of people. And the state makes a shit ton of money. Just employ them for a while, get people trained on the equipment so that you can send them back eventually, figure out how you're going to get the replacement parts for that stuff, and problem solved. I mean, these things are enormous.
Unless you want the problem.
Unless you don't want the
fires
out.
Started the problem.
Well, that was really
what years was that taking place?
Well, it's always going on in California, but when I was living there, it was like the early 2000s when I experienced a major fire there.
Okay.
A huge fire in Southern California. And you could see how they're able to bring the military equipment right off of these planes.
All of these problems are solvable, every single one.
So there's a character that seems to be part of this narrative, and I'm gonna introduce him here.
Right. Yeah.
And,
we know of one too.
It's
Is
this
the
guy.
who's
you
the
probably-
exiled foreign minister? Is that who you're going for?
Yeah, this guy Mukhtar Ablyazov.
Oh, he looks like a
Ablyazov.
sweetie.
Oh my.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Oh my.
So this guy's a gangster.
Ablyazov.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
Ablyazov?
was about to say he's got.
Ablyazov.
So let's read his bio a little bit here. A Kazakh businessman and political activist who served as chairman of the Bank of Turin Alem and is co-founder and leader of the unregistered political party Democratic Choice Kazakhstan. He was also the former head of the state-owned Kazakhstan Electricity Gold Operating Company. Like, how do you get those gigs? It's just like on your merit, really? Oh, okay. As well as briefly holding the position of Minister for Energy, Industry, Trade under, I'm not even going to attempt that name, cabinet, before resigning from joining the opposition against President Nursultan Nazarbayev. In November 2001, he, along with other Kazakh government officials, founded the DCK, Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan.
Always bringing democracy. It's always bringing in democracy, right?
Yep. As a result, he was imprisoned in March of 2002 over accusations of financial fraud and political abuse until being pardoned by Nazarbayev. Why would he pardon him? That's interesting. After being released from prison, he ceased his former political activities with the opposition, probably part of the terms and conditions.
Pardon might have had something to do with hidden money getting back, you know.
Could be. Yep. Ablyazov has been accused of embezzling, here's your hidden money, $6 billion from BTA Bank while serving as chairman. In 2015, a French court in Lyon issued an extradition order. However, in December 2016, France's highest administrative court, the Conseil d'État, canceled the extradition order on the ground that Russia had a political motive in making the extradition request. Ablyazov was subsequently released from the Fleury-Mérogis prison and is believed to be currently residing in Paris, France. The UK High Court of Justice twice issued arrest warrants on Ablyazov, most recently on 25th July 2019, and extended to 22 months of court-ordered detention. So it goes on and on with this guy. Early life and education. He loved books, grew up playing chess. So he's probably a bright guy. He excelled in every class. He also partly worked as a loader at a rural farm. At 17, he became a theoretician and a professor. Attended Alma-Ata State University and transferred to Moscow Engineering. So he's probably a pretty bright guy. He's probably a pretty smart dude.
It seems like France is very good at taking in political people who've got wanting political refuge. And wasn't the Khomeini was there for so many years.
Yeah, Khomeini was there. Khomeini was a nobody. I mean, really, he was just a no one. Theoretically living in exile.
With France, you know, they're curious.
Well, France and England both do the same thing.
Yeah.
England brought Selassie over and allowed Selassie to hang out in England for a long time while there was a lot of strife in Ethiopia. And then, you know, when that sort of cleared away, they brought him back and reinserted him. So I think England and France have a history of basically giving political prisoners some kind of, you know, refuge or sanctuary, because they're probably involved in either MI6 or whatever, Interpol or whatever kind of intelligence
England
agency.
always shows up, you know, if you pull the thread long enough and hard enough.
Oh, look, he was in exile in the United Kingdom as well. So there we go.
Yeah.
Deportation of his wife and daughter. So this guy has a freaking like rap sheet, alleged fraud charges, Interpol red notice. Look at all the court proceedings he has against him: arrest warrants, criminal court of Kazakhstan, Southern District of New York, jumps
you
in on
go.
this guy.
There you go.
Oh, bastion of democracy.
Injustice.
This dude is kind of big time global criminal or global liberator or both. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
U.S. District Court, Eastern District Court of Virginia, Judicial Circuit Court of Virginia, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. He's been in the Court of the Seychelles.
Oh my goodness.
There you
I
go.
mean,
That's Epstein Island.
I mean, this guy he's got money laundering
Wow.
through New York City real
Holy
estate.
smokes. Moscow, Tagansky.
The Silk Road Group.
Jeez. Money laundering through New York City real estate.
Yep.
Wow.
Abliazov. Go ahead.
I'm just reading.
Abliazov is the BTA chairman. As the BTA chairman, the bank partnered on investment projects in Georgia with the Silk Road Group, a company with a history of alleged financial fraud and money laundering during Abliazov's chairmanship. And at the time of alleged financial mismanagement, BTA loans were made to Silk Road Group projects.
Keep reading.
Or the Silk Road Group owned companies. In 2014, Silk Road Group collaborated with former BTA executives Yurkin Tadashev and Abliazov, business partners, to repay outstanding BTA bank loans. He and the Silk Road Group co-owned a Georgian bank. It'd be nice just to own a bank. Create your own bank, own a bank.
Yeah. When we first moved here, our congressman owned a bank. Charles Taylor owned, I forget the name of the bank, the big local bank.
The Silk Road Group was revealed to be a client of the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca. This is just like global octopus stuff. He and the Silk Road Group co-owned a Georgian bank, creating a conflict of interest. The Silk Road Group was revealed to be a client of the Panamanian law firm. Okay, we saw that, which specialized in offshore corporate structuring, accounting for purposes of sanction and tax evasion, and the subject of the Panama Papers. The Silk Road Group entered into agreement with the Trump Organization
to license Trump
the Trump brand for 2 luxury developments in Batumi and Tbilisi, Georgia. The deal was canceled when Trump became president to avoid conflict of interest. The Silk Road Group received loans from BTA while Abliazov was bank chairman, and Trump Organization involvement with SRG may be subject of Robert Mueller investigation into collusion with the Russian government and the Trump campaign. A Kazakh businessman, Murat Khan Tokmati, was convicted of negligent manslaughter for the accidental shooting of banker Yurzan Tadashev. These are just gang hits, man. These are gang hits on a hunting trip.
God.
Yes, where we
Sounds like Dick Cheney.
That's out of the Dick Cheney playbook,
right?
For which he was sentenced for 1 year in prison. 13 years later, in a 2017 Kazakh television documentary, Tokmati said that he was hired by Abliazov to kill Tadashev, who is Abliazov's BTA bank partner and shareholder.
You know, it's like almost you look at this like, who has time for all this?
Whoa.
Obviously, people with lots of vested interests in money, blackmail, and power, and consequences.
Right.
Kazakh Special Forces.
Right.
However, the Kazakh Special Forces allegedly resorted to openly unlawful methods, and as claimed by Tokmati's wife, carried out a search of the house without lawyers, planted weapons, and interrogated him in the absence of lawyers. She also stated that I was informed that Mr. Tokmati was tortured all the weekend and persuaded to give the testimony convenient to the NSC. Crazy, huh?
Wow. Personal life. Oh, and in his personal life.
Yeah, so this guy is austere. During his time in London, Abliazov was described as not fitting the Western stereotype of fabulously wealthy businessmen from the old Soviet Union. Well, those guys were the oligarchs, right? Those were the Jewish oligarchs that got kicked out by Putin, Roman Abramovich, and
Marks and Spencer suits.
So this guy's different, right? No bling, no yachts, no trophy wife, no ostentatious cars. So he cuts a modest figure, Marks and Spencer suits.
Right. And so the upshot is that this guy supposedly claims, at least we heard this from someone talking from this the Schiller Institute and a couple of other places, right? Is that what you found out, that he claims he's behind this thing, right?
No, I stumbled upon it from another
Okay, so
direction.
so there's been a couple of reports that this person in I've heard in France, and I also heard in Kiev, but France makes more sense given all that, that he is claiming to have been running this revolution in Kazakhstan on Facebook, which would account for the fact that the first thing that the government did was shut down the internet in Kazakhstan. And I think it might be reopening in a couple of limited places right now, but it's still shut down. So, so this person in exile with apparently a lot of money is supposedly the person fomenting all this. All right. And as I'm sure you could see, it has all the earmarks of a color revolution, but is it like a false color revolution?
Yeah, I mean, this is where all this stuff gets really muddied, right? Like the revolution that looks like a revolution, but isn't a revolution, but it's really a coup. Like kind of what happened here, actually.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All in the name of democracy, which we are not a democracy, we're a republic.
And that guy just looks like a thug, just an out and out thug. And this goes back
What a rap sheet.
This goes back to my contention, and most people who have their eyes open really just understand the world is being run by gangs. I mean,
yes, that's right.
And even Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum is a gang. It's just another form of a gang.
Oh, very much so. And it's all gang tactics.
It's all gang tactics, extortion, larceny, threat, right?
And protection.
Protection. That's part of the larceny, the protection, right? Extortion. It's all part of what happens in gangland. Yeah. And then you whack people that are your opposition when you need to. So it's just it's gang warfare, open gang warfare.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and look at how they're letting all the MS-13 up through the borders, all these cartels, right, to flood into the country. It's more terror coming in on the local level. Yeah.
It's sort of like the gang leaders are recruiting their foot soldiers. Yeah. Which is what they are. They're foot soldiers.
Right.
They're made men, although they're not really made men. But the other thing is this Bitcoin thing that is also connected to Kazakhstan, which I talked about, and they were keeping the price on energy down so that the Bitcoin miners could access the energy, and also the people could benefit from that. But somebody told him, so they did a tax. They put in this tax and apparently they being the Kazakh government was making like $3 billion a year from the Bitcoin mining. So if they're making $3 billion a year from the Bitcoin mining, how much Bitcoin are they mining? Right? Are they mining 6 billion a year? Because they're cutting them in for half.
Right.
The government itself, but they're not doing the mining. They're getting
but they're getting
a cut.
They're getting a cut, and it was a big cut.
Sorry.
Because they were giving them the cheap energy in order for them. Because when these guys go through to solve these algorithms on every transaction on Bitcoin, it takes a ton of energy, and mostly because you got all these other people that are trying to solve the equation at the same time. And the first one that solves it gets that proof of contract, and that's when the block on the chain, or part of the block on the chain, is verified, and that's when the transaction goes through. So it's not just the person who does that, but all these other people that are doing it simultaneously, and the one that solves it the fastest, which is usually the one that has the greatest amount of computing power and the greatest amount of power to power their computing power, is the one that would get it. So everybody's jockeying for bigger computer power and bigger power to power the computers, so that they can get the algorithm first. And that's a problem. So when you have a ton of energy, that is devoted to that, it'll drive your energy costs up tremendously. And what happened is that they artificially kept it low for a period of time. And so the guy who was in charge, the president of Kazakhstan, said, okay, I gotta hit you with a tax because I can't do this. I can't continue to do this.
Why?
Well, because maybe somebody told him not to do it. So I got to hit you with a tax. And I think the tax was to offset the rise of the energy price that he'd have to bring, and he would give it as a break to the consumer, right? So he'd be able to keep it low, like, take from Paul to pay Peter over here.
Mm.
But apparently the Bitcoin miners were like, we're already giving you money. We don't need to pay a tax. And so they reneged on that. They were like, no, we're not going to pay this tax. So that's when things began to escalate. And he was like, okay, I just got to raise the prices. And that's what happens. I'm going to raise the price of energy. And then apparently that was also an impediment to the Bitcoin miners, who, by the way, the majority of them came from China.
Mhm.
Because China was like, we're going to put and I think it had to do with that Three Gorges Dam. I think they were using the Three
It always
Gorges
goes
Dam
back to that dam.
to power a lot of these Bitcoin mining operations. And then when the dam got like to this point where it was going to overflow,
Mhm.
they probably had to shut it down, right? They probably had to shut down the Bitcoining operations because they had to do something else with the dam versus using this like hydroelectricity.
And do you
Now-
remember when that was that they shut down the dam?
It was about a year ago, I think, or maybe a year and a half ago, when
I remember there was a big kerfuffle, but
they kept getting hit with like just, flooding and monsoon.
Mhm.
So that probably chased out a lot of these Bitcoin miners from China, and Kazakhstan was right next door.
Yeah.
With the promise of all this cheap energy, because you just said that 40% of the world's uranium comes from there. They've got
Right.
massive gas and
Oh,
oil
yeah.
reserves. So
Mhm.
on the surface, it looks great. And Kazakhstan is number 3 in the world behind China and the United States for Bitcoin mining.
Right. And
Interesting.
here's another take on why the uranium is really important, is because now you're hearing, all the globalists amongst themselves are admitting that they can't go straight to green, right?
Right.
There's no enough power, and they're going to have to build nuclear power in the interim if they want to get off of
Hmm.
quote unquote fossil fuels. It's not fossil fuels.
Right. A total classic bait and switch.
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Like, how many environmentalists and green people would jump on board with the green agenda, and really the green agenda being about more nuclear power plants?
Right.
Right,
It's
yeah.
like, oh, sorry.
Right. And the amount of water power plants use is astounding, talking about environmental situation. Oh, the water. Yeah. Well, they're not using,
Yeah, I should
seawater.
watch my water use, right?
Right. Don't
me a break.
flush. Don't flush. Don't flush. If it's yellow, let it mellow, and all that stuff.
Yeah, in the meanwhile, here in Nashville, they put up 20 new hotels in the past 5 years. But I should watch my water intake in a temperate rainforest
20
Yeah.
new hotels.
Yep. And they're
in
kind of
5 years.
they're polishing them off still. I guess they're anticipating something, or maybe or turning into housing. They're also building housing.
And they're all ugly.
Every mountainside has
There's
got housing going up on it. And it's all pretty hideous stuff.
It's probably HUD housing. I bet that's what it is.
I have no idea, but
Uh,
the hotels are hideous.
Yeah.
Really,
so-
they look like Soviet bloc buildings to
But-
me.
Yeah, I don't.
But-
Yeah, I don't. At least what I hear, I think the influx here has slowed.
Don't know.
So, but
But
anyway,
anyway,
go ahead.
back to the topic.
So these miners are now coming to the United States to mine more Bitcoin, right? Which should be great for our grid. So they got rid of their miners. They wound up being able to, And who knows what happens after that point? Does the Kazakh government just take over those Bitcoin mining operations? Probably.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about them to know what, what they entail, physically or structurally.
Well, I mean, what they entail is like massive server farms.
Okay.
So
it
think of,
takes literal space.
oh yeah, I mean, you've got
What
to
is
have.
a server? What is a farm? What does that look like?
Well, I'll show you.
Give me an image for my
I'll
mind.
find you. I'll find you an image.
Great.
That way you can see what a server farm looks like.
Also, I have a big question about how is our energy structure going to service all of that if we've sold off, we talked about this last night, we're selling off our national gas and oil reserves to Iran and China, which is to me treasonous. And the pipeline was cut off immediately when the bozo took over.
Day one,
cut off that pipeline coming in from back or to
Canada.
going to Canada or from Canada.
So this is kind of what a server farm looks like, and this is a small one, but this is small. And they can occupy pretty enormous buildings. Let me see if I can just keep talking, Krys.
Well, I'm laughing to myself and saying, well, they should just run it on solar panels.
Isn't that like Masaki's den?
Yeah. So this is not an exact
Just so
replication.
I have
It's not an exact
so
replication of a Bitcoin mining operation, but it's really close.
But it's dedicated to cryptocurrency, or is it dedicated specifically to Bitcoin?
Well, I would
Or
say
do they
probably
each have their own farm?
Well, I think probably mostly to Bitcoin, because that's where the highest payouts are. So the idea, right, is you have these really, really long algorithmic problems that have to be solved so that a transaction can take place. So if you and I do an exchange, let's say I sent you some Bitcoin, okay? Somebody somewhere as a miner would solve this algorithm and would verify the transaction, right? They'd verify the transaction. They would have proof of that transaction taking place. And as a result of that, they would be rewarded a financial sum as part of that transaction. This is how the transactions via Bitcoin are made. And it's through the identification of the transaction and the proof of the transaction. In order to prove that transaction, you and I are engaged in an algorithmic equation, right? And that equation, it's a unique equation, and it has to be solved and then validated as a contract between you and I. And these miners are the ones that do that. And then they get a fee that's associated with proving,
a finder's fee.
proving that contract.
Right.
So what you have is you have miners from all over the world who are competing, and when a transaction comes up, they're competing to solve that transaction.
So you have human to human competition in mining. These are human
Well, I would
beings
say it's
doing
machine.
this?
It's machine to machine, but those machines are being monitored by humans.
So it's not humans doing this mining. It's machine to machine.
That's right. So the humans are engaged in and I take my computer to a guy here in town every now and then. He's got a little mining operation in his office, and so it's constantly working.
So
right?
do you have to have special equipment?
Well, you have to have good computing power, and then you have to be able to have the code in order to get into Bitcoin and the blockchain and be able to successfully mine it, right? So there's protocols that are set up. And anybody could tap into the protocols. If you don't have the mining power or the computing power, your residual income as a result of that may not be all that tremendous. You might be able to mine $150, $200 a month, right? But if you have big computing power, these massive server farms, you can take in a lot of money, because there are hundreds of thousands of transactions on Bitcoin being made every day.
Mhm.
So somebody has to verify those transactions. See, that's part of the bank process. That's what the miners complete. So, but in order to do that, the amount of energy is enormous. It's
But that
substantial.
somebody is not a somebody, it's a machine.
That's right. It's a machine.
Okay. So that leads me then to say, well, what about these VFD quantum computers? Why can't they do it with less energy?
Well, it's not really, they may be able to do it faster, right? They may be able to do it slightly faster. The really what you want to do is you want to have a different transaction formula. And that's, so Ethereum, which came after blockchain, made that process lighter, and it took less power in order to validate an Ethereum transaction because it's based on something different, right? And so then after Ethereum, you have a spinoff of Ethereum, and you have Solana, or you have Polygon, which are even more elegant, take less bandwidth and less power. So transactions on those platforms are way cheaper. And a lot of people think that they should be the de facto platforms moving forward in the future.
Right.
So it's not about really changing the quantum computing or the computing power. It's about changing the efficacy and the eco-friendly component of the transaction between the two people that happens inside of the blockchain.
Okay, and so Bitcoin as the first kid on the block is more archaic than these subsequent systems that have been put in place. And then how does all this map back on to the topic of the day?
Well, that's because
Khazak.
you had Kazakhstan being the third largest center of miners on the planet,
Okay.
Bitcoin miners, and now they're leaving.
Right.
And so, and they, by the way, they had this kind of digital diaspora getting kicked out of China because China was like, number one, they had to deal with the Three Gorges Dam. That's number one. Number two, they're like, we need to move our energy reserves into other areas. So we'll sacrifice getting some digital dollars from, these miners, and we'll kick them out, or they'll just wind up leaving on their own
You think
accord.
that plays into this uprising?
I think it's part of it because, so there's going to be space now for people to go back into Kazakhstan and start mining Bitcoin again, right? And that once those guys are gone, so now you have the guy who's running the joint, right? He could say, okay, well, let's continue to mine some Bitcoin. Now we've gotten rid of these miners. Let's just run the operation ourselves. And if they do that, then what happens? Well, then they may be able to use that energy apportion to the, I don't know how they'll slice and dice it, but when these things happen, they're always multi-layered.
Sure.
Yeah.
They take care of a lot of different problems all at one time.
Yeah. And so the other situation, of course, is, Kazakhstan's got China bordering on its east and Russia on its north, more or less, and two very large borders. And China's Belt and Road Initiative goes through Kazakhstan, or one of its venues. So I see it also, it just seems, at least most likely to me, that Russia has, because what's the outcome of this is basically Russia and the current president have reached a kind of an accord, and Nazarbayev, for all his faults, was very much for an independent Kazakhstan.
Right.
And so it seems like this was also, putting a little block, or at least a spigot on China's Belt and Road to pass through, and to sort of, gain control of that. And, in the absence of the United States, showing anything resembling, any kind of, resolve internationally, you know, Russia's going to take advantage of that. And, you know, I
Sure.
wouldn't blame them. They should, you know, they should take as much advantage as they can, you know, from their own point of view and for, you know, a Russia-centric point of view.
Do you think they started
Which
work
is-
already on the Belt and Road through Kazakhstan?
They've been
Is there
doing it,
physical
you know,
manifestation?
yeah, there's some kind of trains and what have you. But, you know, the Belt and Road, of course, is the Chinese idea to gain control of all the commerce coming out of China, running into Europe and also into Africa.
It's like their
you know,
version of the Silk
Yeah.
Road.
You know?
I've heard that they are way overextended on this thing.
Yes.
Yeah, heard that
Yes.
too.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up just before I forget it is Tony Blair's
Night.
association. Besides the fact that he just got knighted, bless his soul, by the little auto biddy, you know, whatever she is anymore. They just knighted dear sweet Tony Blair, but he for many
Didn't you write
years
that down?
has had a whatever sort of firm he has consulted, and he's like a major advisor to Kazakhstan, to the president,
Yeah, that was a
Kazakhstan.
surprise. Yeah.
right? And you know, and
Mhm.
Blair was involved, you know, even beforehand. He's got his checkered career, but you can say he was really the main articulator of the Iraq subsequent wars against terror, starting with the Iraq War II under Bush. You know,
Yeah,
he was really, you know,
War
Bush's
criminal.
mouthpiece because Bush was not articulate. And, you know, and so anyway, he was pushing that and he's just gone on and on and on. Oh, geez, what's that movie? The Ghost Rider. It's actually a Polanski movie. Did you see
Mhm.
that?
No.
Okay, so it's a Roman Polanski movie. Take it from whence it comes. But he did a movie about somebody who is ghostwriting a book for a character very much by like Tony Blair. And as he gets deeper into the writing, he realizes, you know, the corruption and the deception behind this character. And you know, so it's a really good movie, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have an issue with watching a Roman Polanski movie. I mean, you know, not that I'm going to root for Roman Polanski, but I mean, if it was a good movie, I'd probably watch
As a
it.
film
Yeah,
director,
yeah. So, you know, that's a good movie. I don't know. Do you have anything? I think that's covered, like all the
That
little.
was really interesting. There was that one other thing that I heard somewhere that Nursultan Nazarbayev wanted to bring in common law to Kazakhstan, and that was a jaw dropper. Steve thinks that he heard that it was Tokayev who wanted to do it, but I think I heard Nazarbayev.
But I don't know what common
That
law
was
in
just like, what?
Yeah. But what is
That was
common law
interesting.
in that context? You know,
And now on the Brent global prices for crude oil is now $82.30 per barrel on the global market.
it's going up.
And the US West Texas Intermediate crude futures are at $79.76. So this is the highest since late November. And Kazakhstan daily puts out 1.6 million barrels.
So and also Libya have cut production, and when you cut
Yeah,
production, that often brings the prices up.
They're down by 500,000 barrels.
So
A day.
that's what we'll see. We'll see either the elimination of things like pipelines, getting them shut down. We'll see countries cutting production, being subsidized, by the way. They'll cut production, but they'll be subsidized for the production they cut.
They're always
Mhm,
subsidized.
mhm.
That'll happen because
Yeah,
they-
well,
yeah.
they do that for me too. They subsidize my books. And, you know,
yeah,
it's
sure.
really, it's really kind of them.
But ultimately, it's like they just want to turn off the spigot. You know, they don't want people to have any access to petroleum, whether it's gas or oil or even coal, and that's how they'll bring about the
Yeah.
fourth industrial revolution. They'll just turn the pumps off.
Well,
Yeah.
I also read this morning somewhere that, and I couldn't find it again, that electricity prices jumped 40% in France.
Right.
Couldn't
Yep.
find it again.
And in England, huge
Yeah.
electricity, and they're talking about having brownouts and rolling blackouts in England now.
And isn't France heavily nuclear,
Yeah, they are.
right?
Yeah.
Pretty
Mhm.
sure.
They are. Yeah.
Did you see that video of what's his name, Macron, with the guy raising his fist?
Oh,
Have you seen that video?
Guy
It's-
raising-
I don't know. We've seen a couple of
A recent
bizarro
one?
Macron videos
let me see if
lately.
I can find it. It's
No.
really weird.
Hmm.
It's like he's not digging it.
It's funny. It's funny of like Macron and Canada guy.
Oh, Trudeau.
Trudeau. They've
Oh
kind of
my
merged
God.
somehow
That's a
in
good point.
my consciousness.
Mhm.
You know, Macron and Trudeau. They've like become one entity somehow. You know.
Trudeau is just insufferable.
You know.
They all are. I mean, you know.
I got to tease the unvaccinated.
Mm.
Let me see if I can find this thing. They are insufferable.
They are, all of them, the whole lot of them. You know,
But the best, I think that maybe one of the best videos of last year, of 2021, were the French farmers dumping the manure.
oh, and at Macron's, like,
At
then they were
Macron- at
flinging it up
Macron's,
into the bedroom windows, right?
Yeah. I mean, they
On
had
the
it up on a
third
big thing
story
and they
or
were
something?
flinging it up. And actually, they brought a spray, a manure spray, and they sprayed it and it blew open the door. And it went into,
Yeah, the
it went
windows
into
up,
his
like, on the
bedroom
third
of
floor or
his
something.
home. I don't know if it's a home he uses much, but anyway, you know, that was one cheery moment from last
He's
year.
taken
let's-
he's taken a fair amount of abuse.
He should. He didn't get it any near what he deserves.
And then
But
there's-
Not to mention he's another fixed election.
let's not forget that Kazakhstan is also like the seat of where they want the New World religion to emanate from. Haven't heard any more talk about that since we did our report 2 years ago.
Mm,
Wow, was it 2 years? But that's also part of the plan. With the Vatican. The
Yeah,
Vatican
I
has
think-
just gone full on
well, I
Marxist.
think since Francis got in, I think the Vatican has kind of had a power play with the group in Kazakhstan, and
Yeah.
you know, so because Francis is fully joined in with, you know, with the Marxist, the cultural Marxist agenda. So I see that they don't need that if it's coming from.
If you have
him.
any interest in learning like the structural changes that took place in the Vatican, then you need to read Malachi Martin's book, Windswept House. It's brilliant because Malachi Martin actually was a Jesuit priest. He left the priesthood and he was very close to the Pope at that time of Vatican II.
Like an advisor.
Yeah. So he knows it's like all the inside politics of how they were dismantling the power of the office of the Pope and diluting it down to the level of bishop and sharing all that power amongst the bishops. But it was all infiltrated by Marxist ideology way back in 1960s.
In the 60s, yeah. So I'm reading his book on the Jesuits, where he talks about that whole history of Marxist infiltration and liberation theology and how that shifted the church, and then the Jesuits, who were formed on absolute, capitulation to the Pope, absolute under his authority completely, started rejecting him, and then of course now we have the Jesuit in the papacy. So it's kind of all over now.
But tell about how they were dissolved for what, 30 years?
They were dissolved in I think the early 1800s for 30, 40 years. They actually got dissolved. And then they came back and didn't skip a beat.
So were they really dissolved?
Well, they're meeting in secret, what can I tell you?
Yeah, but it's really helpful to understand the structure of and the mechanism for how these big institutions are infiltrated. What's the methodology? And it's a playbook. And once you see it and get into it from the inside, then you can see how it's played out all around the globe, and especially here in America. And I just kept seeing multiple parallels to the Trump administration and how they were undermining what he was trying to do, his work, and exactly the same thing what the Pope was going through. And I have all my little margin notes like, oh my God, this looks familiar.
Yeah, this is okay.
Yeah, that's
And then John Paul II, who, there were interesting parallels because he made a lot of decisions that didn't make any sense
Right.
given his position
Right.
too.
Which is what
So-
also was reminiscent
Yeah.
of the Trump administration. Like, what the heck is he doing?
So-
Why would you put John Bolton in there? And the Pope did very similar things,
Yeah.
just like brain scrambling decisions. So
Yeah.
really helpful read. And Malachi Martin is a phenomenal writer. There's nobody does character development like Malachi Martin.
Interesting.
Oh, he's great to read.
Yeah. You find what you're looking for?
Well, I found something different. So this is kind of interesting. I'm just going to read it here.
You look like you're having an earthquake because your whole set is vibrating up and down.
That's probably him, the key. You know how he hits, you know how he hits the keyboard.
I smashed the
Right?
keyboards.
You saw that, was it
Do
with
you?
Sean Connery, about a young writer? What was the name of the movie?
Oh, that was
Finding
Finding
Forrester.
Forrester. Yeah.
Right? Pound those keyboards, you know, he's like yelling at the
What
guy
was
when
it?
he's trying to write. Pound
Yep.
those keys.
That was
Those
Sean
old
Connery's last
typewriters.
movie.
That was
Yeah.
such a good
That was
feel
good.
with those keys.
It
on
was
those
good.
wires.
Anyway.
It was. I think it was a good movie to go out on. So
Yeah.
this is from Twitter. The user, the tweeter is at Kamergroy, Turkish mercenary Mehmet Durik, who played a key role during the Armenian-Azerbaijani war, found dead in military uniform among protesters in Kazakhstan.
Oh, would you back up and read that again so I can absorb it?
It says Turkish mercenary Mehmet Durik, who played a key role during the Armenian-Azerbaijani war, found dead in military uniform among protesters in Kazakhstan, says
Mhm.
independent Kazakh media. So what's that about? You
What is
probably
that?
have some Turkish mercenaries. This is weird. This whole thing is like
Mr. Erdogan got his finger in his
there's a weird war going on right now. And I would not be surprised if China and Israel are also in the mix there. Like Israel's always in everything. Nothing goes on in the world without Israel.
It's true.
That's true. You figure they're just
Yeah.
too busy giving everyone their 11th booster by now. But
Israel and England.
Yeah, I think a lot of that Israeli stuff is fake.
Like what Israeli stuff?
I think that a lot of the Israeli vaccination stuff is fake.
Oh,
like that,
really?
they're fully vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe. I don't know. It's, who knows? This whole, yeah. So, I just, just conclude that there's just so many different possibilities. And I guess the thing that I look at is, right, well, who wins in the end? So right now it looks like Russia and the current president,
For now,
and it
yeah.
looks like Nazarbayev is out. It just feels, in general, it just feels like it was something
And
to get rid of
his-
him.
His extended
Nazarbayev
family.
and his family,
Yeah.
and get them out of their tendrils out of the country, and may not be a bad thing. I don't know how that's going to play out. It just never seems to play out for the people, but we'll see.
Well, I'm interested now, since we clicked into the Duran, to follow them and see what they have to say, because I thought their analysis was very knowledgeable.
Do you know who was from Kyrgyzstan? Was the Tsarnaev brothers.
Huh. Boston?
Yeah.
They were from Kurdistan.
No, they're no, they're
Kazakhstan or
Kazakhstan.
Kurdistan?
Kyrgyzstan, isn't
They're
it?
from
Kyrgyzstan.
Yeah, okay.
Kyrgyzstan.
Okay.
South.
Yeah.
Kyrgyzstan. Okay.
Yeah, that's where they were from.
That was a curious thing too, was it not?
No, God, we could spend hours
Yeah, I know.
on
Well, that
the
was-
Boston thing.
What a mess.
It was like, yeah. So everything since we started looking at things, is just
Well, it
ends up
seems
being a
like-
mess. The deeper you go, the weirder it gets.
And it
right?
doesn't matter how far back you go. If you go back to when you were born or before you were born, or, before your father was born. There's the same
there's-
intrigue and threads and
There's plenty of high strange and
shenanigans,
occulted history and
right?
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, it's really an astonishment.
Yep.
Well, if
absolutely.
nothing, it keeps us from boredom. There's no boredom.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of material to mine there, and especially because the outside world has become so tedious and two-dimensional and cliche. I mean, it's like there's not a lot to be interested in the outside world unless there's some kind of hotspot and friction like what we're talking about today, or some weird development, or it's like, but even that, there's like this whole Robert Malone thing. Everybody's like really into Robert Malone, and I'm like, that guy was pushing. In 2021, he was pushing something called COVAX, which was theoretically an antidote to the vaccines. Like, really, do we need another vaccine as an antidote to the vaccines? He's also talked openly about surveillance and tracking. There's no birth date associated with Robert Malone. You can't find a birth date on him.
Well,
That's
can't
interesting.
even do his chart. Jeez.
Yeah. So, like, who is this guy really? I've never I follow him on Twitter only because I want to see what certain people have to say. I don't follow him on Twitter because I want to retweet him. I follow Elon Musk, and I don't retweet him. I want to see what he has to say.
Right.
Most of the time,
Because they're influencers.
They're influencers. Most of the time, it's nonsense. But but even with like Robert Malone, and Joe Rogan is championing him, and now everybody's talking about mass formation psychosis, and is he who he purports to be? What's his real purpose here? So I mean, there's that stuff in the world which I think is mildly interesting, but not entirely. So when you go into some of the stuff that you're talking about, Krys, and what we're talking about, and like a lot of the occulted history, I mean, to me, that's where it's juicy. And that's where you can find certain things like, oh, look at that. Look at that.
Well, I'm developing some new theories.
Okay. When
Influenced by Father Malachi Martin.
When they're fully baked, you can jump on here and hatch your theories on us.
Just look at Father Malachi Martin for your clue.
Okay. So do you guys want to talk about your books? This is your time to do a little self-promotion.
Take it away, Steve.
Sure, books. So we've got pre-orders still on the Logo for Sophia site.
He's falling off the desk.
So Walking with Alethea, about the woman and her abuse in the Baltimore Catholic Church and her high school in the 60s, late 60s, and her recovery from it. That's official pub date is March 1st, but anyone going to the website can pre-order it and get it free of shipping, which is
I thought that was
going way up. You can still get it. No, there's no special note and all that stuff. But it's no special note and no rush to get it to them. But the free shipping is going to hold till the pub date.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay. And that's got a pub date of March 1st. And that's had a great pre-order response. And in fact, the books are on their way next week. We're actually having like 8 friends over to do a packing party. Krys is going to make some Turkish soup, and we'll come up for a few other things. So then the Peter Lamborn Wilson book, False Messiah, which is a great book. I did the illustration of it for Peter, and he was sick for a long time. It took a year really for us to finish it off because he was not very well. So that I'm got books coming in on that, and that's Autonomida, which is a great Brooklyn publishing house, long venerated independent publishing house. Tends mostly in the realms of anarchy and spirituality. So that False Messiah, Peter Lamborn Wilson's got 60 books. He's one of our treasures. Really happy to be able to publish a book by him,
AKA Hakim Bey.
He was also called Hakim Bey, which
this is the temporary autonomous zone.
Primary autonomous zone comes from this guy, right? So he has a following. So hopefully that book will do well. And I'm sorry he's not well, but hopefully he'll improve. So I'm waiting on books to come for that, and I'll put that up on the website. It's called False Messiah. It's got some great art in it.
Yeah, the illustrations are beautiful.
And I'll just leave it at that for now. I've got the third of the fantasy trilogy by Mindy Meltz. I'm going to start editing that, and so all of this work is kind of put off mine. And I think once I get this big order of books out, I'll be able to finish off my book. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, I'm pretty pleased with
I
it.
think Steve's book is delicious.
It's very delicious.
It's delicious.
It's got recipes and everything.
It's delicious.
Should try and launch it around your birthday.
That's
Oh,
hopefully
that's a nice
I'd be
idea.
happy if it comes in
that
from
idea.
that. So what am I?
That's
Oh, that's my Paul McCartney birthday, 64.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's been good. There's been a real big uptick
Yeah,
for Logosophia with
Yeah.
Jean Hardigan's book. It's really
yeah.
wow, like an avalanche of orders we've never seen.
Yeah,
ever.
so
So
we're, he's got a publicist, and we're, sending books to Terry Gross and Fresh Air and all these, BFDs. So, so it has a chance, and then anything that makes the publishing company well known is going to be a boost for the rest of our books.
Yeah.
I also want to say, enjoyed your seminar. Was that last Saturday?
Oh, yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Sunday,
Did a nice-
Sunday.
Last Sunday, did a nice job with that. So, you still got some things going on or coming up.
Yeah, I'm gonna be on with Giuseppe and Dave Scorpio today, and they have a show on Revolution Radio, but
Mhm.
they also stream live on Twitch. So that's at 5 o'clock today on Giuseppe's Twitch channel, and also just audio on Rev Radio. So that's going to happen today.
good.
And this week has been really, really good in terms of media. Monday, I was on with Noreen, a help hand, and she's got a show called Wild at Heart on Revolution Radio. And then on Wednesday night, I was with Jeffrey Doherty,
Oh wow, really?
which is Nighttime in the Heartland. That's his show on Rockfin, and that was really good. Although,
Oh, nice.
Steve, you may want to skip it because there's a lot of Tartaria talk.
Oh, no.
Oh, not Tartaria again.
Yes, Tartaria talk. So,
Fuck, even Cliff I is talking about Tartaria, so.
Cliff's just trying to get back in my good graces.
Is it? That's what he's doing.
That's it.
Either that or he's stealing more material from me.
Probably.
He's
So
keeping an eye on you, Robert.
it's funny, I sent him a link. I sent him a tweet. I tweeted him directly on
Recently?
Twitter. Oh, on Twitter. I said, I'm going in on you today. I let him know
What do you mean I'm going
Oh,
in?
he's
on you?
talking about him. He's talking about
when I did the show where I was like not real thrilled about.
Oh, that's good. So you gave
His-
him a heads up.
No, I
That's
let him
good.
know. I was being
good.
open.
Hmm.
So to his credit, I mean, he hasn't blocked me on Twitter. So
Well,
He's
he's
what,
gone
eight-
after other people.
He
He
hasn't-
went after Penny Kelly. He got a bug on her for some god unknown reason.
and he's welcome to come on my show if he wants to talk about
That
it.
would be fun.
Right. I'm not opposed to having him on my show.
Hmm.
I've asked him before and it never really worked. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I've got and Giuseppe and Dave are great. I really like these guys. Dave was in Ecuador, like Bonnie and Gary, and he left. He had a coffee plantation there.
Mm.
And he left about, I don't know, maybe about 8 or 9 months ago to come back to the States
Oh, around the same
'Cause-
time as Bonnie and Gary.
because he just thought this is going to get untenable in Ecuador.
The
Mhm.
State Department told them, if you're thinking of leaving, leave now,
Yeah.
or you may not be able to get out indefinitely. And they were planning on leaving like maybe a week or two down the road. So they just had to up their game, which was hard, but doable.
But these guys are really, really, they're around our age. They're really bright. They're irreverent, no holds barred. I mean, they'll talk about anything.
What's their show again?
It's called the Perfect Triangle, I think,
Okay.
and it's on a Revolution Radio and also Twitch.
Okay.
So they stream simultaneously.
You need a newsletter, Robert.
Well, I'm working on it. I'm ramping up my email lists. So it's all in due time.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Anyway, and just staying busy here
Yeah.
and continuing to do the astrological work. And
Yeah. Oh, and we had a fun, I don't know if it's fun, but I think
was
we had a
fun.
really good show with Nish on
Yeah.
Wednesday. If anybody knows, I don't even know how to get to it at this point, but I'm sure people know how to get to Nish and her shows. I don't know where it's going to show up. I don't, anyway, I don't know if it's behind a paywall or not, or how it works. But anyway, it was a good show.
so right after we did the show on Friday, she sent me an email. Can you send me the Crimi's email address again?
Oh, I see.
I got to have him back on the show.
So
So-
it was nice to reconnect.
It
It's
was
been
good.
a while.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll
right.
see you guys in a month, and I'm
Thanks,
sure
Robert. This was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
we'll
All
have
right.
plenty to
very
talk
good.
about.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. We'll keep an
Um,
eye on this situation.
We'll see what transpires. Should be an interesting month. Happy New
Okay.
Year, everybody.
You guys take care.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you as
bye-bye.
well.
Okay.
You have the maps.
All right. That was the Crimis topping off a micro and macro edition of the Friday FARcast here on YouTube. And this is where we're going to be, unless I have to talk about something really specific. You probably know what I'm talking about when I talk about specific. So we'll be here on Fridays. It'll be good. Be really good. And Monday through Thursday over on 15 Minutes of Flame, and Sunday night on the Sunday Night Astro Live channel, also known as the 11th House. So 6 days of mostly high quality broadcasting, and plenty of content to go around. So have a great weekend. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Catch me tonight over on Twitch with Giuseppe Favavenko, Dave Scorpio, The Perfect Triangle. That's his show. You can look it up on Twitch. And join us over there, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay? And for the rest of you, I'll see you on Sunday night. Take care.